this point, the question really becomes not is the industry going to shrink? It's really how far. Did retail in the US, 79% of the volume is at $13 and below.
The message by tasty, how we communicate, that it should taste better, that's not perceived in the consumer.
We basically have told these consumers that any products under $20, any products under $10 are mass produced, poor quality, and really you shouldn't buy those products. I'm not really aware of any other industry that actually stigmatizes its lower end products. You don't see Honda criticizing its Civic buyers.
So what's it? Innovation. Let's talk about the innovation.
We're really targeting our innovation efforts, really going after those segments.
Innovation for me is just not another product. It's just we don't need more products. We just need to have a different mindset and see actually a gap.
Our kind of view is the industry has to expand its definition of what wine is.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, all the listeners to the Vino Visionaries. Today we have another episode, and I'm very glad because today we have an episode with one of the biggest voice in leadership in the US, the John Sutton, CEO of the Wine Group. So tell John, you have been doing amazing things in your whole career, but including the Wine Group, it has been a massive different innovations and changes you need to adapt in the whole way. But before we get on these details, I wanted to know a little bit your background, because before you started in the wine industry, you have a very interesting background. So what's what's happened with you on the time in the White House? So how this mindset of John, actually the CEO John now, all this the back experiences, how influence how the way you think?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here. I always enjoy, any opportunity to really talk about the wine group and the wine industry in general. Yeah, I sort of have probably one of the most kind of unorthodox and circuitous routes to becoming CEO, particularly CEO of a wine company, probably of anybody you'd ever come across. But I started out in my 20s, as you mentioned, working in the White House. I was a staff assistant for the deputy chief of staff at the time, and I often tell people I feel like sometimes I peaked in my 20s because even though I was a staff assistant, I was right in the chief of staff suite. The vice president was right to the left. The Oval Office was, 20 feet down the hall or so. So I did sort of have just a front row center seat of witnessing all the things and chaos that went around. And that time in my life, I really learned a lot. It probably shaped who I am, particularly as a leader today. My boss at the time was probably the hardest worker I've ever seen. Like, I'm not exaggerating when I say in the 3.5 years that I was there, he probably took 3 days off, including
Wow.
holidays. And I'm talking starting at 7, working to 11. And I wouldn't say I'm quite that bad, but I'm probably, pretty close. There's probably not a day that goes by that I don't think about the business, really 24/7. There, I sort of learned work ethic. When I go to meetings and places, I don't pretend or believe I'm the smartest person in the room, but I know I'm always the most prepared. I over prepare for everything. I study everything, and going into meetings, going into situations, knowing that I prepared always kind of gives me the confidence to know that I can succeed. And probably lastly, I just mentioned I within the wine group, I mention this to our younger folks all the time, and it's not an exact analogy or parallel between politics and the business world, but when I was there, somebody pulled me aside one day and gave me some advice and said, "Be nice to everybody on the way up because they're going to pass you on the way down." And that's
Wow.
really applicable in politics where you could be a hot name or attach yourself to a hot person, and 6 months later power changes or whatever, and you're not so hot anymore. But in the out bev world, it is such a small industry, it is such a small environment, and so I use that here and tell people, be nice, to everybody on your way up, because you never know when your paths are going to cross again in the future. Because in our industry, you'll never know somebody who works for you today, you may be working for them, down the road, or you may need them for a contact or a reference, or they may be the difference in you're getting a job or not getting a job. So I've taken a lot of that wisdom with me into my role today.
So that is shaping a lot of how do you think about business, yeah? Because you are one of you take a lot of responsibility because your decision is not only one decision is going to affect your life or a small group. It's a lot of your brains there. It's like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's more than 125 brains
Yeah,
you
yeah,
have.
something like that.
Yeah.
We have a lot of
So
brain.
I'm talking about so many people that are working with so many brands and distribution retailers and all the ecosystem as a whole. One decision you make is going through the whole ecosystem in the wine industry, because we have so many brands, you're so big. So, how is the responsibilities feel like for you? Because it's became the environment changes so much. Consumers' behavior, technologies, and all these external, external things we can't control. Politics, like geopolitics, is can actually can affect a lot of business. How to deal with this, and how you can inspire other people to don't losing then like how you help yourself to make the decision that's going to benefit the whole ecosystem when you have so much pressure from external things we don't have control.
Yeah, it's probably the hardest and probably frankly the loneliest, part of the job, because you realize, so many things that you have to decide or do, potentially have real world impact on people, inside the company or outside of the company. And I think what I've just found, kind of at the end of the day, one, you've got to do the right thing, and if you believe, you're doing the right thing, then at the end of the day, that's all that matters, and you can feel good about the decision if it's really truly what the industry and what the company itself, ultimately needs. And second, what we've tried to do within the wine group, particularly as we've had to make some very difficult decisions in a challenging market over the last several years, is really have a commitment to our employees on transparency. And we have quarterly town hall meetings. We try to do the best job we can to uh, explain to our employees the state of the business, try to explain when we've made tough decisions, such as layoffs or reductions in force, the reasons behind that. And the one thing we always ask in return, if we are transparent on our end, even if you disagree with that information, you've got to accept it and sort of move on. And I think we've found that has gone a long way and has really been helpful, that generally our employees, even if they don't like a decision, as long as we're honest and upfront about it and explain it, then they understand that, and that's kind of helped a lot in sort of building a culture of trust, and if we have that, that certainly makes making decisions easier on my end.
Yeah, because yeah, like I said, I think when you are in such a position, it's very hard to making some hard decisions because it's always, yeah, affecting so many people around you. So thank you for sharing your experience with others. My other question is, you have been in the on the wine group for 18 years now. Yeah, correct me if that's the wrong number, but that's my well, that's what my research said.
Yeah,
So
no,
what
that sounds about right.
so what since we started in the wine group, what do we have seen has been changing so much on the consumer side? Like if you compare when you start, like 15 years ago, what it was the consumers back then, what the consumers now, and why we needed to really think differently from compared to a decade ago or 15 years ago when you just started in the wine group.
Yeah, so I think when you look at where the consumer is today and kind of the changing preferences, lower consumption, some of the things that are out there, uh, that are getting discussed, rightfully so, a lot. They a lot of those were there 10 years ago and 15 years ago. The trends themselves aren't new per se. I think what's really, really new and kind of surprising and different is coming out of COVID. I think the acceleration of a lot of those trends have really moved forward, and that's what's caught, I think, a lot of people off guard. So, when I first started, obviously value wines under $10 in particular, was thriving, and was growing. We had obviously a lot of success kind of in that area, and you can start to see kind of in that, call it 2013 range. Slowly everybody was going premium, and we started going premium ourselves, so we've participated in that trend ourselves, and you could start to see this shift in the consumer, but it wasn't pronounced, and so value wines might start to decline 1%, 2% at most, year over year. But then COVID hit, you had kind of a temporary boom, and then coming out of COVID, those trends just accelerated. And now you've had the value segment down closer to 8%. I think what's also changed a lot, the consumer just has a lot more choice, now. When you're talking about RTDs, you're talking about a coffee craze, functional beverages. You can throw in cannabis, even GLP-1s, but the dollar and the choice that the consumer today is trying to stretch, is so much pronounced than it was 10 years ago. So I just think a lot of the trends that people saw but thought they had time to kind of deal and react to has exploded and accelerated in the last 4 or so years. And that's been a challenge.
That's a very great point of view. It's this trend is already was there, so people already saw those things coming. They just don't react to it because they thought it's gonna take longer. Just remind me like the Kodak story. They knew the digital camera would come, but they thought it's gonna take 10 years or 20 years. I don't know the number exactly, but they didn't want to invest at the moment because they thought they're gonna have time to get there, and they didn't. So the digital
Yeah.
camera
I think
became
that's
everything.
right, and I'd also add, I don't know that anybody saw a decline in value wines being as big and pronounced kind of as they has been. So, I think you thought you had more time, one, and then two, the decline wouldn't, when it came, would be gradual and maybe not as severe as it has been. And then, coming out of COVID, you throw in inflationary and other factors, it's really just, accelerated probably what everybody or many people thought would be a slow and gradual decline, with maybe the bottom not as far as it's going to end up being.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I think COVID accelerates so many things. I think not just in the wine business, but I guess all those other industries start to suffering after COVID. With COVID, everything was so good because everybody spent so much money, and then suddenly there is no money. And then what is actually in COVID time where the planes and airlines and such were suffering so much, they are the best in the market and earning so much money. So it's been completely upside down, like all the different business in like airlines was suffering the COVID, tourism was suffering the COVID. Now they are up, and the people actually was doing well in the COVID, like the wine industry. Now we start to decline. It just seems like a little cycle. With the after COVID was a big impact in many business, I would say.
Oh yeah, it's sort of the upside down world. I tell people all the time, I never thought, living through COVID and managing through COVID, that I'd actually long for the COVID days, because those years have been so much better than sort of the inflationary and post-COVID years. And a lot of that, at least for the wine industry and at least for big companies, like ours, I tell people all the time, when you look at the challenges, you've got lower consumer demand on one side, then you've got inflation, you've got rising costs. There have been times of labor challenges. Everybody's got excess inventory. There's a worldwide glut of wine. And I think most managers in their careers, through various cycles, have probably had to deal with each one of those individually. But I'm not sure all of those forces and all of those challenges have ever hit at exactly the same time. And that is what's really made the last 4 years really so challenging. Because also, when you think about it, some of these challenges contradict each other. So,
Yeah.
for example, if there's inflation, you might want to take price to deal with that. But that's just going to make your inventory situation worse. And oh, by the way, if there's a worldwide glut of wine, you can't move any of that inventory. And conversely, if you're long on wine or inventory, you might want to discount and try to move some of that, but that's impossible to do, or very challenging if there's inflation and your margins are squeezed. So you've got all these various factors going on. Some of them contradict each other, and you're trying to figure out how to deal with kind of each one. And that's really been the puzzle, I'd call it, from the last sort of 4 years or so.
Yeah, business you need to thinking about like in the context. Yeah, you need to really build that puzzle because it's so many pieces and sometimes they not really talk to each other. It's contradictory and it's like oh, and that's why you need to have like a very open mind as well to working through frictions and contradictories factors that's not stressing you out or don't panic you. You need a little a self um how are we gonna say like you needed to be in your mind. You need to say like okay, let's how we deal with this without panic, because if you start to panic with the contradictory factors, that's how your mind is start to make a bad decision.
Yeah, that's right. And kind of, because like I mentioned, some of these may contradict each other. So you may make a decision that's right to attack one of those challenges, but it can have a negative impact on a different one. So that's what makes it challenging, and then um, you know hard. But as I mentioned, if you can explain it to people and be transparent about it, That's really the best you can do in a very difficult and challenging circumstances, and hope they understand.
Yeah, it's like a chess game. You need to know exactly what you need to do, like what you're gonna be the next one. It's gonna be strategic, but you know they may have another risk around in the corner. This is getting on this about what the contradicted talk. Let's engage with the next topic that I want to talk to you. John, we have a lot of people talking at the wine industry, and one moment, like a couple of years ago, I think now things started to moving differently a little bit, but then a couple of years ago, I have a big talk and a big think about everybody's gonna be premium, everybody position yourself the same. It's look like you're going to a football player, but everybody's wanted to be a Messi, like to be the premium guy. Recognized as a Messi, and everyone wanted to be a Messi on this football game. That's how I feel. Like that's how I feel. Like everyone wanted to be Messi, and everyone wanted to be the famous as a Messi. Everyone wanted to be premium as a Messi, and everybody just like to play the same game as a Messi play in the football game. And you didn't realize we needed everybody else play different games to actually make that one industry actually work. But they have this a big talk about premiumization, where sadly everybody tried to, even the people who actually was working a different game, to change the game to just to play the same position everybody else. And then sadly became like everybody, it's just the desire of everybody, and even the new wineries being open, including in Brazil, I would say, has been always tried to be the most premiumization one. And then now we just, it's pretty much like a mercy. Everyone you see, everybody wanted to be messy on the football game. There's no one wanted to be commercial anymore. No one wanted to play any other different. It's very small players who wanted to do different stuff in the wine industry, like almost like the majority feel like the pressure or the validation. That's what it is, the validation of the premium. um but I want to take in something I wrote another day, and in my thoughts I felt like the wine industry need to see like ourselves like a pyramid. you know we have a different types of customers, different cycles of customers. We need someone here on the base of the pyramid that's it's going to grow up to the top. But at the same time, with the education system, somehow they don't actually communicate the value, or maybe all sommeliers ourselves like me, maybe we did not, or we don't do it yet, or we did not in the past communicate how the value of the basic wine here, 'cause that is actually the most people can afford, and it's how most people actually buy. And because everybody want to be the Messi on the football game. So how, and then I think that's become a big confusing. Like everybody now, it's don't know what to do, because everybody doesn't really understand the market. And I wanted to clarify, like, how are your thoughts about this? Because you definitely have a lot of premium brands that we work on, but also you have a very good value affordable ones as well. You can play a lot of the two games there because you're a big company. But how you see, you can talk about your experience inside of the wine group, but also as a whole, like what you can see from outside of the wine industry. Like compare this analogy, like the football game and also the pyramids with different types of cycles of the consumers and different types of consumers as well, because some of them they're not interested to go up either, and that's okay. We don't need to force people to go up if they don't want to.
Yeah, look, that analogy is a great one. I might have to steal it. And like I completely agree with you. We do view it, as two different consumers, really two different games, as you said. So as I mentioned earlier, premiumization, it's real. It's not a bad strategy, and we're participating in it. While at the same time, we believe very, very strongly in the value segment, and our portfolio is actually heavily weighted under $15. And so we believe you can kind of walk and chew gum at the same time and innovate in the value segment and also create, premium brands, and premiumize as well. My main point has really been, uh, while I mentioned and said and agree that premiumization is not a bad strategy at all, but it's had consequences. And those consequences are really that it's made wine, particularly in the US, unaffordable and in many cases, inaccessible. It's kind of changed wine from an everyday beverage, like it is in some countries like Spain and Italy, to really a product just for special occasions. And it's really priced out the everyday consumer because, as you said, there are a lot of consumers that either can't afford to buy a $20 bottle of wine, or even if they can, frankly, they don't want to or don't see the need to. And so we've basically have told these consumers that any products under $20, any products under $10 are mass produced, poor quality, and really you shouldn't buy those products. And to me, that's, well, not only wrong, but it has and it's going to have really devastating consequences on the industry because when you look at all the numbers, all of these sort of economic dollars, the vitality of the industry in the US, the political influence, all of that rises with or lays with wines under $15. Um, and as all of that goes away and we tell the consumer not to buy those kind of products, so does the economic vitality of the industry essentially going forward. And so I'm not here to raise doom and gloom, but I think at this point, the question really becomes not is the industry going to shrink? It's really how far, because until the value brands start to level off, we're just shrinking kind of the economic vitality, of the industry. I'll share one statistic with you. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Somebody sent me last week, a well-known analyst here in the U.S., because he's heard me make that point in other contexts before, and he sent me a slide that said at retail in the U.S., 79% of the volume is at $13 and below. 21% is $13 and above. Now he didn't, this is just me guessing. This wasn't part of his information, but I would venture of that 21% that's above 13, 16, 17% of it is probably 13 to $20. Very, very low volume above $20. And his analysis showed if uh, $13 plus wine would have to grow 28% to offset the current declines in $13 and below wines. Now, we all know growing in this environment 28%, $13 plus wines is an impossibility. So that just reinforces kind of the point that the industry needs these products and the consumer, really for the long-term health and vitality of the industry, because by premiumizing only, um, you will never offset kind of the losses, at the $20 and below price points.
And then I would add more things there, John. I think it'd be more replaceable. because if people have so many choices and then you became so expensive and you just people just gonna be replaceable. And the time you were replaceable, we just I just remember when it was 20 years living in Brazil, I didn't even know what's red and white was. Like
Yeah,
I
well,
didn't
I
even
think
know,
that
like culturally didn't exist it.
I think you're
Like
seeing that, you know, the cost per ounce of wine when you compare it to, you know, beer and spirits, is much higher. And we're essentially we're basically asking consumers to, when they're in a restaurant, spend $15 on a glass of wine, or 20 or $30 in a store for a bottle of wine, uh, and essentially to purchase something that they don't understand, and purchase something they don't know the taste of. And if you don't know the taste of it, you don't understand it, why would you spend that kind of money? Of course, you're going to end up buying a less expensive cocktail, or choose something else that at least you know what it's going to taste like when you buy it. And so it's a real challenge. I'm sure we'll talk about it, but I think it leads to all kinds of issues around what then becomes the on ramp, for wine to trade people up in the future if all these products go away. There's a real risk, you know, that the consumer doesn't trade up. Um, the youngest generation, I've got daughters that you know just turned 23. They're probably the first generation that's going to grow up with their first exposure to alcohol being, you know, RTDs. And so, and they taste, many of them taste quite good. So I think there's a real risk,
sweet. They love sweet
real,
stuff.
you know, so there's a real risk and a real question about whether those kind of consumers that now grow up with the taste of RTDs, are they eventually going to migrate over to, you know, $50 wines like we all did, if there's no value kind of on ramp to wine in the future?
The thing is, though, when you're talking now, I started to think when I work in the retail space, we love it to increase in the sales of wines and the portfolio of wines, because actually that's what's the most profitable as well, because compared to other ones in the retail space, it was one of the most profitable was sell wine. So you're thinking like and then you just mentioned about restaurant, it's one of the most expensive to drink is restaurant. So we literally, it's not just about the producer we're talking here, we're talking about the whole chain, like the whole supply chain as well, like the retailers and restaurants and everything, because everyone have this mentality, people is going to buy, going to pay more for wine, but I don't think the value has been delivered to be able to charge more, and the people just feel the feeling is maybe we rip off, because if I can, like the wine, I can buy wine for $20 and the retailers and the $15 in the restaurants. Why are you gonna buy? And the same as well. So the prices in retailers became less affordable. So and like the commercial one, we tell people don't drink it. The wine is below X amount. So okay, if I can't have, if it's not gonna be good, I don't want to even try. So if they don't try, they never start in the wine. And so I think we have a big bubble of many things we have it done as the industry as a whole, as all the channels as well to get in the wine industry. We may have a problem. We need to almost like a break in the model, because how this model is going to work, thinking about moving forward, because it's all related, and a lot of the mentality there as well, it's been very difficult. And the consumers, I think that's a lot of the consumers don't drink wine, and mainly because they don't understand it, because we make that very difficult to try to charge more, I guess. And then also, so we're making so many wines that people have no idea what the names are, so maybe making them very hard to choose one. But also, I feel like the whole language as well, the tannin is acidity. It's not really friendly for people. So people have no idea And then I don't know how much people actually know what's a good wine it should taste like, it's a bad wine it should taste like either. Because if you do a blind taste with normal consumer, average consumers, then they don't know like the $80 a bottle or the $20 a bottle, $30 a bottle. It's the message by tasty how we communicate that it should taste better. That's not perceived in the consumer, because when you're doing the blind taste with consumer, if you put it $30 and $100 a bottle, they can't tell you. And if they don't know the price, then they're probably going to say, "Ah, I prefer the $30, because the $100 is probably what it's give you the prestige and to drink the more expensive wine. Okay, that's more about the feeling, but not necessarily about the taste. But we sell as the most beautiful asset about the $100 a bottle is the taste. But in the end, it's not, the people don't buy $100 of wine because the taste. They buy $100 wine because the feeling. So it's a lot of you misunderstood in this bubble. So how we can solve it, John?
Well, if I had the exact answer, I'd probably be a millionaire.
The billionaire in the wine industry.
But I have some ideas. One, I think we would both agree. There's plenty of good wines under $15, and there's plenty of not so good wines. And similarly, there's plenty of good wines, over $30 or $50, and plenty of not so good wines. So the narrative that just because you're above a certain price point equals quality or means something is good, and if you're below that, um, it's bad is just wrong. And so one thing I think, I appreciate forums like yourself and what you're doing in this podcast to be able to come on and talk about things. I think that's a start, because I'm not really aware of any other industry that actually stigmatizes, its lower end products. You don't see Honda criticizing its Civic buyers, etc. So I think that's step one. Step two, we're certainly trying through marketing and other means to bring back wine as sort of a affordable everyday product, instead of just being perceived as a luxury item. And some of that is trying to, use humor and things like that in advertising. Like we have a Car Cupcakes brand, for example, has a marketing campaign called "Using Humor, Serious Wine for the Unserious Consumer," and again, trying to make wine more approachable and less stuffy. Because at the end of the day, I think 99 consumers, and by the way, I am one of them, really only care about the taste. Like, I don't get caught up in the romance of wine or anything else. I like the taste or not? Um, and that can be in a $5 wine, or that can be a $50 wine. It really doesn't matter. Do I like it or not? And I think that's how 99% of the consumers actually approach things. Yet we've tailored all of our efforts trying to capture that 1%, um, that might care about the scores and might care about some of the snobbery of wine and the stories, but it's really just a narrow group. And I think if we can just get back to showing the consumer that wine can be, part of a everyday lifestyle. It can be drunk in occasions beyond dinner, other everyday occasions. It's affordable and it tastes good. Um, I think that's sort of the roadmap back. And what gives me some hope. Now, you may tell me I'm wrong, or some of your listeners will, because I'm not intimately familiar in Europe with Spain and Italy. But I was vacationing in Spain in the fall, and I was blown away by, every cafe was packed by 11 a.m. everybody's drinking wine and beer, and wine was less expensive than water. Like literally every glass was $2 to $4. And so I think the European culture, particularly coming out of COVID, I know there's challenges there too, but generally speaking, I think if the US can get back to that sort of European culture of wine, making it accessible, affordable, and everyday and fun again, we'll be able to sort of bring back those categories.
Yeah. So what's the innovation? Let's talk about the innovation because something I read, like I listening a lot of the podcast with you, was about how short you guys can put in a product in the market after you discussing approval. Because everybody will talk about innovation. Everybody just see not the opportunities, but also the things like, oh, it's taking forever. That we needed to waiting couple years, 3 years, 4 years before we can actually change it or doing some movements in the wine industry. But you doing something very different. But also, what is innovation for you, John? Because my experience, the innovation for me is just not another product. It's just we don't need more products. We just need to have a different mindset, and it's the actually a gap of something has not been necessary being solved the problem yet. So so I think there is two different ways. Some people just want to jump in the train because everyone is doing, and it's just like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and if everybody doing cane wine, everybody's doing cane wine, so I'll jump in that. But they're not necessarily see the gap. They're not necessarily try to solve a problem. Where I see innovation is actually when you see the gap, we see actually there is some opportunity there that's people has not been addressed yet. So that's the gap of the innovation. But there is a two different mindset in the wine industry. I see a lot of the people they don't try to solve a problem. They try to get something that anything just to look like new. What's your thoughts about that's different mindsets in innovation, but also what are you guys doing on the innovation side and how you can actually making that journey of the innovation much speed then the most of the wine industry thinks they can't do it because I don't know. Sometimes I think it's impossibility is just in your mind. Everything is possible if you wanted to make possible. So that's that's why I think that's why I think like everybody's like impossible. It's like well depends. If you think it's impossible, will be impossible. If you think it's possible, I'm 100% sure it's gonna be possible. But I wanted to give you like tell me your experience. How are you making things that people in wine industry say is impossible possible because that's pretty interesting. You say like three months or 6 months before the between you can moving as fast your product is. So I was impressed with the time, correct with the time, but I thought it was impressive because everybody said like take years to innovate anything in the wine industry, and you could do much quicker. I was incredible about the
Yeah,
time.
oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I let me answer that kind of two ways. One on the so on the innovation side, yeah, we are particularly for a company our size, pretty fast. We can get new items to market typically within 12 months, and if you're talking about kind of like a standard Cabernet or varietal, we could probably do it in 3 to 4. The formula stuff or newer types of products might take a full year, and maybe it's the commitment to it. I think maybe it's kind of our culture and mindset. We are a pretty fast-paced company, and we don't have a lot of layers. We don't have a lot of bureaucracy, so we're pretty flat, and so that I think allows us to make decisions, pretty fast. On the innovation front, I would agree with you, in as much as I really hate saying this because it's what we would prefer to do, but the last thing the market really needs is another Cabernet. Frankly, probably at any price point. So our innovation really, over the last couple years, we launched 8 new brands in 2025, something like 33 SKUs. We have another 10 SKUs coming, in 2026. We're already testing 35 different ideas potentially for 2027 to eventually narrow that down. But we are specifically going after really segments and areas of the industry that are working. There is growth. It's just very surgical in certain areas. And a lot of those areas, it's unfortunately not traditional wine, unless again you're going real premium. But it's things like flavored wine products. There's high alc is, in some cases doing really well. Low alc products, no alc products, products in tetras, cans, kind of alternative packaging. So our kind of view is the industry's kind of has to expand its definition of what wine is and what isn't, because the consumer today, particularly the younger consumer, they have a much different definition of what wine is. They're not necessarily looking at it as traditional wine. It can be fruit flavored. It can be in tetras. Slightly sparkling. You name it, and so we're really, kind of targeting our innovation efforts really going after those segments, and then hopefully having some of those products become the future on ramps to wine, that then maybe you can eventually trade the consumer up into more traditional products or higher price products. The second thing I'd sort of point out, it's not innovation, but I think you were getting at it with change. And for those that maybe can't or don't want to innovate, and that's really changing your marketing tactics and your focus, and moving away from just portraying wine at dinner and sort of the terroir and the vineyards and some of the stuffiness and elitism we were talking about, and really trying to portray wine in everyday settings, wine in more occasions than just dinner. And we're doing things, like, for example, our Mad Dog product has a collaboration with WWE. Our Fuel product has a collaboration, with NASCAR. We are, about to launch with our Mayomi brand, an in-person experience, a luxury experience in Vail, Colorado in March. Um, Trying to, attract new consumers with that brand, and various collaborations with third parties and others, even outside the industry, to try to do various things. Whether our Cooper and Thief brand is partnering with Larceny, a bourbon brand, to sort of co-market. And so I think everybody has to look at changing their marketing. That is something that anybody can easily do. Even if you have a traditional brand and you don't plan to innovate, sort of off of that, you sort of need to find these collaborations, need to expand your horizon to depict wine in other settings, and really try to show the consumer that wine can really be more than a luxury item just served at dinner.
Yeah, agree. And then I think innovation needed to take in different ways. Can be innovation in message, can be innovation on collaboration, can be innovation in different things. If it's not necessarily needed always to be the product, it could be innovation in
Absolutely. Well said.
different areas. Yeah. So people say innovation, but they always thinking you just needed to get another product completely different. But I think sometimes the innovation could come in a different ways, like different model, different channel, different partnerships, different collaboration story. That's how you can changing like your market or expand your market in this case to get other people to know you, and then that's how you can because when you do collaboration with some brands, while the younger people it's going to engage you more, you're probably going to slightly change your like the awareness of your brand for this category you did not. And this is kind of innovation as well. So I think innovation in having different layers. Innovation is such a big token. You can do so much for your brand if you just know, oh, I always have it done this way. I just need to do this way. It's always has been done this way, and it just trapped on I have been done, always have been done this way. I think that's the big trap there for the industry.
Yeah.
So what is about do you think like the industry? Because for example, we're talking about this, like about the taste of the wine. People like what they like, independent what you like. You and me can drink the same wine and I like it and you don't like it, and it's completely normal, independent of the price, independent if it's $10, independent if it's $50, independent if it's $100, doesn't matter. Some people just don't like it, some specific wine for any reason. So and then biological, because we are humans, we have biological things, but somehow we try to extend it, and the wine became like a number. So we have so many wine critics there, so many 95 points here that tell everybody that is a good one. Um, and usually it's pushing on, and usually if you're looking how they look like the wine, not necessarily is the same as consumers want. Because for a long time it was like consumers just wanted something easier, fruity, and blah blah blah. And for these guys, because they're way up beyond how much they know about wine, they like much more what we call serious wine. There is like how the connection or disconnection, probably that's a bit of word, you see with the wine professional try to make your wine as a number, to make your wine as a wine should taste like this and that and that, and the reality, like the people actually buy, uh, or like who tell what's good, what's bad, and actually who is actually buy tell us what's good, what's bad. Because if you put it at two numbers, it's completely different. You can see by Vivino, that was a great discover for us, because the wine professionals were saying, "Ah, but they just care about the consumers, and there's no professional taste in there, and you should get a professional." But I start to listen. That's like, yeah, but they buy, and consumers they can actually buy. The wine critics not buy, so that's a massive, because a lot of the people in the wine industry doesn't like Vivino, because the Vivino doesn't give you the notes or the number of the final one, because it actually matters for the critics, because they think consumer doesn't know how to choose wine. But like, I don't know, like I wanted to hear your thoughts. I don't even know they have the right question for you yet, but I feel like it's so confusing,
I I
because
think I
we
know where
just
you're
try to
going.
educate
It's
consumers, but consumers just drink whatever they want. It's just became a big mess for me.
yeah. I mean, it's hard to understand ultimately, why you would criticize something that sells millions of cases, because uh, whether that means it's sweet, or slightly bubbled, slightly fruity, whatever that is, it's obviously fulfilling a consumer need. Otherwise, the consumer wouldn't buy it. So, um, to me, sort of, I know here at the wine group, we're not really precious about, what wine isn't. Ultimately, we're really looking to, create products that, you know, both fill a consumer need, and then, second, obviously, hopefully make money. And if you check both of those off, um, uh, to me, that's the win. So we, at the end of the day, if we're creating a product that sells millions of cases, that's we're very happy with that, and it sells, it satisfies the
You don't care for
obviously.
wine critics say it's terrible wine, or the wine people say no, it's not wine and whatever. You don't really care. You just see, doesn't matter.
No,
You
but
don't
I
need the
also
validation
think
from you.
we really don't, but I also think it misses a little bit, and you sort of hit on this, that there is a biological component to it. The younger consumers tend to like sweet, um, and I think part of
Do
that
you
is
know why? Yeah. Do you
I
know
don't
why?
know why, but I think part of it is biological. I know myself.
Because
I drank sweeter wines.
breastfeeding,
Say that
breastfeeding,
again.
the milk, the breastfeeding or milk, like
Ah,
when you're young, is sweet. So that's the first thing you actually, most humans have in contact is the sweet flavor, because the milk of the mother is sweet. So when the first memory we creating in your head and your mind is actually sweet. So that's why we like it sweet, like the majority. So someone's developing the flavors quicker than the others, and we biological. And it's very difficult to say is one thing for everybody, but usually most of humans have a little appreciate about the sweet, and the more you're younger, because you still develop the other stuff of your palate with time, and that's why your palate change, your say change, your flavors change with the time. But at the beginning, the first memory you have, and in your first ages when you develop it before you develop the other ones, is the sweet, because the mother's milk.
okay. I thank
There's
you. I
a
didn't
there's a
know
research about that, by the way.
that.
There's a research about that. So yeah, it's good because I
But
was curious about why we when I was younger, like love Moscato and sweet stuff, and it's not necessary I drink that once anymore. So why? And I tried to research, and that's what I discovered. So yeah.
yeah, so to not then give what the consumer wants, particularly at that stage of their life, just makes no sense to me. Our philosophy has always been, we celebrate really any wine that brings new consumers into the category. Doesn't matter what it is, and I actually cheer even when competitors have success, or competitors
Great.
do an acquisition. And I don't know if that's unique or not, but my philosophy is, if they did an acquisition and bring, new consumers into the category, that just provides an opportunity down the road for us to have a product to potentially trade them over to. So to me, it's just very short sighted to have just this strict definition of one type and one style of wine, when really, anything that can ultimately drive new consumers into the category is something that provides an opportunity for anybody to take advantage of over time. So any of these low, under $20, under $10 products, whether they're traditional wine or not traditional wine, really should be celebrated for the role that they play in bringing consumers in, and then eventually providing the opportunity for those consumers to trade up to much higher priced wines.
100%, 100%. I haven't been talking with like a lot of the people who try to define wine, to protect the wine how it is, but there is not transition path, or at least not very clear transition path. If all these innovations go something else, is not wine. How we
Yeah.
can transition for these traditional wines afterwards. We need that path. We had that before anyway. We have many things in US. It was sweeter, was cold, it was much fun, and we had it for the whole time. Somehow we lost this. I just want to take so much of your time because almost 1 o'clock, but I want almost 1 hour of podcast. But I wanted to try to get a little bit more my last two questions. So one is about marketing. Marketing is such a big talk in the wine industry. But the thing is about marketing is because it seems like everybody say the bigger guys have the money to do marketing and we don't, and then they just see what it's just one way to do market is if you have a big budget of money to do marketing. If you don't, you can do nothing. um or very little that's not going to be affected. So, but I wanted to hear your opinion about this because, in my experiences, and even I know like XXL, for example, or if you're not, you need to wait to 20 years to make a brand and something like that. But XXL for me was 1 year and a half, and then last year they sold 63 million. I think that's the number. If I'm not correct, please correct me. But it was over $60 million worth in US in 1 year and a half a brand. They just exploded in the market. And then I'm sure they did not try to make the same amount of marketing for you need to do for traditional wines. Because traditional wines you have like a red ocean. There's so many of them. There's so many Cabernet Sauvignon, so many Chardonnays. They'll probably be hard and more expensive. So I wanted to get at those thoughts from you, John, because I feel like the wine industry wanted to repeat the same thing, but at the same time they don't want to think outside of the box. And because they don't think outside of the box, and they don't really have money, and they see no possibilities. But what if you think outside of the box and start to see all the opportunities you can create it on this market where we are? We know we're in decline and you're always struggling, but every struggling, every decline, there is a lot of opportunities. And for more you don't have a huge money in your pocket, what we can actually help with advice for those people who doesn't have the same budget as the big companies, but they can still be very creative.
Sure.
Creative.
I mean, well, first of all, while I wouldn't compare, us in any way to a smaller company or an entrepreneurial, I think people would be surprised that our budgets are not as large as they might think they are. And particularly large company wine budgets versus the spirits companies. The spirits companies really do spend, big dollars. But my advice in general would be, first, I'd probably start out with social media, which is, obviously generally free. And if you can find some, influencers to help out as well, because you can create some buzz around the brand. Really for free or very little money. And frankly, I might argue a lot of smaller companies or entrepreneurials are actually better at that than the large companies. Uh, and then from there, if I didn't have a budget, I would just start small and local and try to, hit all maybe the independent stores. In your local area and talk to the owner and see if you can get your brand in there, and then kind of from there go do tastings. If they say yes, try to give the consumer tastings. um, Really, of a lot of the stuff you might spend money on, you can do for free or you could do yourself. It just is going to mean a lot of hard work, sweat equity, and grinding to kind of do it yourself. It's very possible, but I will tell you over the years, the number of acquisition books that I've looked at, that have come across my desk where they are spending very little on marketing. And in
Wow.
fact, the number of times that, just to be provocative, when I was CFO, I would kind of turn to our marketing or sales team and be like, why can they build this brand and barely spend anything on marketing, and we have to spend X, and so uh, I think it can be done, and like I said, I think in a lot of ways, the smaller companies and the entrepreneurs are actually better set up to, um, generate that buzz online and kind of be scrappier than some of the bigger companies. The last point I'll make, and it goes towards why we might not necessarily have huge budgets, at least to start, is there is this, you're trying to balance the two things. But if you pour a bunch of money up front in marketing, and you try to create that buzz, the one risk you sort of have is then the consumer can't find that product. So we're always kind of weighing how much effort and spend you put toward getting the product out there and then going to sort of invest in the marketing. Because the worst case that can happen is you spend a bunch of money, create a buzz, but then the consumer can't find the product anywhere. So
Goodness.
I think you can just be scrappy, get it off the ground, be a little edgy on social media, some of the things maybe larger companies can't do. um, and take your shot, kind of.
Get the advantages of what big company can do it. So just get your advantage by being small, do things
Yeah.
by being small. That's very great. So, John, what's the most important question I haven't asked you today?
Well, I mean, I think, a lot of, I often get the question of, where's the industry going, and kind of, yeah, what do you expect to see, and are we at the bottom? And so, if I kind of answer that, I still think we're going to see a lot of consolidation over the
Yeah.
next 2 to 3 years. I don't see that ending anytime soon. I do think innovation, a lot along the lines we've talked about today, is going to pick up steam. I think more and more people are figuring it out, and I expect within a year or two, others that aren't there yet are gonna see the light and change their ways and their marketing efforts of today. And then I really hope, as we talked about, that if we can look out 3 years from now, we'll really see wine really expand its usage occasion, and it won't just be a product for dinner or for special occasions. And we really have evolved to provide many different options to the consumer, because that's really what they're looking for. More options in different usage occasions, in different parts of their lives. So uh, we're really excited to really help lead that evolution over time.
Yeah, just to keep the wine, it needs to be fit in the people's lifestyle. No people's lifestyle needs to fit in the wine. I think that's the opposite. Put the consumer first, not the product first. I think that's going to be
Exactly.
the biggest change. My last question today: if you think about three things, John. One thing you truly believe the wine industry should stop in doing. Second, one thing do you think that needs to be changed yesterday? Like it's really needs to be changed because we can't go ahead, you can't moving forward because there is something that or some kind of mentality or a thinking or attitude, whatever that's stopping us to moving forward. And the second, what you should start today for a better future.
Yeah, look, I on the stop part, or change, and we talked about this, but I would say, stop focusing solely on premiumization, um, and would stop, or at least change the criticism of value wines, and really embrace, as I mentioned, that I think we can do both. It's not one or the other. It's not a zero sum game. You know, we can market and address to both types of consumer, the luxury consumer and the value consumer. And for all the reasons we talked about, I think when we're criticizing, you know, our own products, all we're doing is telling the consumer not to buy and not to trust these products, and that has all the negative consequences that we talked about earlier today. So it's just not healthy or good for the industry. In terms of start, I think, like we talked about earlier, I think people need to embrace and kind of accept a more expansive definition of wine, really including different flavor profiles, different formats, different packaging types, different price points, and really start focusing more on innovation, whether for somebody that's actual product or the marketing tactics we talked about, and you know, really be more agile and really start changing the storytelling around wine to really make wine products stand out, not only against, you know, other competitive products, but really if you're going to see going forward, your story has to stand out, you know, within other wine products as well. So I think, as we've talked about, too many consumers now see wine as exclusionary and stuffy,
Mm.
and so
So
we really we really need to start to change that narrative, and really bring more humor and fun, I think, into our marketing, and into our discussion and dialogue.
put human first. I think if you just change the mindset, put human first instead the product, I think we're gonna find a way to making like going through this hard time because I think wine became more my product than about what can help humans with. Because when you think about that way, help women with like how can help they enjoy themselves more. That's how you can bring more products. That's how you can bring some more innovation because you think about the consumer. So what they
Yeah.
needed, I'm gonna make that for them. Like, let me. That's not about if you put human first, I think it's gonna be an amazing change for 2026. So thank you for the first interview for January for 2026, John. Thank you so much for this chat. Amazing. I love the chat. Thank you so much for inspire all of us. Thank you for your leadership in the industry. Thank you for taking us to the next step in the wine industry moving forward. Say big guys like you guys and inspire all the other wine industry and take the first steps to moving to the direction of the product, no, consumer centric, not product centric. It's going to be the next step. It's going to helping everybody else afterwards. And thank you for being one of the first one in the path that's going to open the path for the rest of us. So thank you.
Well, thank you. You're way too kind. I appreciate your having me on.